The leading cause of injury for women around the world is not car accidents, muggings, or rapes, but domestic violence. And every day in the United States, more than 3 women are murdered by their husbands. Domestic violence is a daily battle for women all over the world, and yet it is one of the most misunderstood social injustices. Domestic violence has been glamorized by the media, victims have been blamed for their assaults, and people believe abuse is strictly physical or sexual assault. Emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse intimidates victims into staying with their abusers out of fear, and because these forms of abuse do not leave behind bruises, it's harder to recognize.
One out of 6 women has experienced physical and sexual abuse during childhood. Around 3 million women in the U.S. reported experiencing domestic abuse in the past year. 1 out of 5 women have been raped or assaulted in her lifetime. These statistics from the book Domestic Violence, Opposing Viewpoints are very alarming. And yet the violence doesn't get the attention that it should, and it's seen as a really common issue today. We must end domestic violence in our society, and it starts with you. Marina Pisklova is Russia's leading women's rights activist. She studied aeronautical engineering in Moscow, and while conducting research at the Russian Academy of Sciences, was startled to discover family violence had reached epidemic proportions. Because of her efforts, Russian officials started tracking domestic abuse and estimated that in a single year, close to 15,000 women were killed and 50,000 were hospitalized, while only 1/3 to 1/5 of all battered women received medical assistance. With no legislation outlining the abuse, there were no enforcement mechanisms, support groups, or protective agencies for victims. In July 1993, Pisklova founded a hotline for women in distress, later expanding her work to establish the first women's crisis center in the country. She lobbied for legislative banning abuse and worked with an openly hostile law enforcement establishment to bring aid to victims and persecution to criminals. She began a media campaign to expose the violence against women and to educate women about their rights, and regularly appears on radio and television promoting respect for women's rights. Today, her organization, ANNA, National Center for the Prevention of Violence, operates a network of 170 crisis centers across Russia and the former Soviet Union. She is now active not only in combating the scourge of violence against women, but also in trafficking of women and children. In 2004, she was the recipient of the Human Rights Global Leadership Award. Pisklova's efforts have saved countless lives at great risk to her own.
Are very worrying indeed. It affects 1 in 4 women. 30% of cases start, in fact, in pregnancy. 6% of cases are, in fact, men. And shockingly, 2 women die every week in the UK as a result of domestic violence.
After a couple of months, I got pregnant, and it was from that point, it was unexpected, I have to say, and it was after that point, things changed. His behaviour changed. The controlling behaviour came into place then.
Nowhere in the suburbs, in the cold light of day. There in the midst of it, so alive and alone. Words support like bone.
Please take a stand and stop domestic violence where you are. Even if it's saying, no, get your hands off of me. Calling the hotline, telling someone that you're close to, we can start to end domestic violence in our society. It only starts with you. Please make the difference. Make the change.